Home with God, Chapter 22. There is no such thing as the truth. The 10th remembrance does not surprise me even a little, nor does it take my breath away with its originality. I'm sure it doesn't, but it should take your breath away with its meaningfulness. There will be nothing more meaningful said in this entire conversation. When you know that life is eternal, you never again fear death, because you see and understand the nature of it, the wonder of it, the glory of it, the perfection of it, and the impeccable gift that it is. Maybe one day I may write a separate book, Death, the Impeccable Gift. That would be a very good book, a small handbook, a little instruction book for the dying and their loved ones. That would be an extraordinary contribution. In the meantime, we have this conversation to complete, so that you and others who are exploring these subjects more deeply may more deeply understand them. The question now is not whether when you have finished this conversation you will understand what you have always wanted to understand, but whether you will believe what you will have come to know. Why would I not believe it? Because humanity has always had a most difficult time believing the most wonderful truths. And the truths about death are the most wonderful truths of all. These are wonderful truths, I must admit. I want so much to believe every word here. I just hope they are true. You see, there you are already questioning them. O ye of little faith, do you not see that when you are questioning them, you are questioning yourself? If you love the truths that you find in your soul, do not abandon them because someone outside of your soul does not agree with them, or ridicules, or questions them. You are not saying that your truth is the truth. You are saying that it is your truth. There is no such thing as the truth. We've already gone over that. Let it be enough that you get in touch with your truth. This is my truth. What I am coming to understand through my conversations with you is my truth. That is sufficient. That is enough. In fact, what is more than enough? In fact, that is more than enough. That is very powerful. Do you know how powerful it is to have gotten in touch with your own truth about anything? Others will get in touch with their truth as a result of this conversation as well. Because in truth, this is not just your conversation. It is theirs also. Everyone who is reading these words has created this conversation. Do you know that? Do you know that as you are reading these words, you are creating where they are going next? That is mind-boggling concept. It is hard to get my head around because the end of this book already exists. We could flip to the end right now and see what it says. So if all of us reading this are creating it as we go, how come the end already exists? The book on the shelf of the richly appointed library already existed too. But it did not exist in your reality until you saw it there. Everything that you have created is already there. Everything. The fact that it is already there does not mean that you have not created it. It simply means that you are not aware that you have created it. Because from where you are now in the space-time continuum, you cannot see that. Do you know just how mind-bending all this stuff really is? I think I have a pretty good idea. I am so happy now. I feel as though I've been given the information behind the cosmology of the universe. This is the mechanism of life and death. So I suppose now I can go ahead and die. You will choose to die when your life on earth is complete. Your life on earth will be complete when you have experienced all that you came here to experience. Or when I realize that I have not experienced all of it and that there is no other way to experience all of it along the path that I have taken. No, emphatically, no, that cannot happen. No one dies having failed to experience all that they have come to the physical world to experience. What? I said that no one dies having failed to experience all that they came to the physical world to experience. There is no such thing as being incomplete. That is what is meant by the 11th remembrance. The timing and the circumstances of death are always perfect. I believe that. But how does the parent of a child who has been raped, mutilated, and murdered call the circumstances of such a death perfect? How do people who saw their loved one perish on 9/11 accept such a death as perfect? You are asking an awful lot here. This is stretching the credibility of most people to the absolute limit. I have already said that the elegance of life's design is like that of a snowflake. It seems almost too perfect to be believed, too good to be true. Yet, I tell you this. Comfort for the bereaved will be found in the sure knowledge of the certain perfection of God. God is perfect, always and eternally. Now there is only one thing left for you to understand who and what God is. I have told you over and over again in our conversations, and I will tell you here and now once more and finally. God and life are one and the same. Therefore, when I say that God is perfect, I am saying that life is perfect. And it is. The system rests in perfect balance with itself. All things happen in their perfect timing and in their perfect way. It is not always possible to see this, to perceive this from the extremely narrow perspective of human experience. That is a limitation of the physical world. It is a limitation that can, however, be overcome. Many prophets and sages have overcome this limitation of perception by choosing a different perspective, by looking at life a new way. Alas, their messages are often ignored. Their insights are frequently belittled. Often they themselves are condemned. And so the blind continue to lead the blind, because you will not listen to those who can see. Therefore, let those who have ears to hear listen. Imperfection is impossible in the kingdom of God. Yes, but what about here on earth? Here on earth is the kingdom of God. There is no place that exists that is not part of that kingdom. You see, we have this all separated out here on earth. We've got it that life on earth is the trial and the tribulation enabling us to get into the kingdom of God. And it's our idea that death is the way we get in. There is no way to get into the kingdom of God. It is not a place you get into or out of. It is a place where you always are. It is the only place that you can ever be. It sure doesn't seem that way sometimes. That is because you do not remember who you are, and you do not treat others as who they are. If you did, you would experience heaven on earth. You would be home with God everywhere and always. Is there any way that people will can ever get that? Conversations such as this are one way. Do not keep this conversation to yourself. Make sure it gets into as many hands as possible. Share it with the world. But first, bring the meaning of this message deeply into your own life. See God in everyone and everything, and see everything as perfect. You mentioned this earlier, when we talked about people feeling victimized. You suggested that we change our perspective and see everything as perfect, even when in human terms it is obviously not. Perhaps, especially when it's not. For such awareness will bring you peace in the midst of turmoil. Rest in the space of weariness, forgiveness in the moment when when resentment and anger might appear, and a greater love for life than you have ever experienced before. Search for the perfection in every moment. Search for it diligently. Faithfully know that it is there, and that you will find it if you will but look deeply. Now, do you remember when I said, quite early in this conversation, that we would have another opportunity to explore this idea of perfection, and that I was going to ask you to give me an example of that? Well, I am going to ask you now to tell the story of Billy from your workshop. I knew it. I knew then that this is what you were going to bring up. It's the first thing I thought of when you started talking about this. Good. So tell the story. Sure. Helen was one of 97 participants at one of my Recreating Yourself retreats. held during the week between Christmas and New Year's every year for the past 10 years. On the final night of the retreat before our New Year's Eve resolutions ritual, Helen raised her hand and asked for the microphone. I've heard a lot this week about how God is our best friend, how God is wonderful and loving, and how we should all have a conversation with God every day, she began. Well, if I had a conversation with God, I would tell him that I am damned angry with him. That's okay, I said. God can handle that. But are you okay? No, she said, and her voice was trembling now. Well, just what are you so angry with God about? Helen took a deep breath. Almost 21 years ago, we adopted a baby boy. We had tried to conceive for 5 years without success. It looked like we would never be parents. My biological clock was running out. So we adopted Billy. 3 weeks later, I discovered I was pregnant. I had the child, another boy, and raised them both as my own. Although we did tell our first son when he grew a little older that he was adopted. We wanted to be truthful with him. We told him we loved him exactly the same as his brother, and we knew that our actions showed him that. Billy was 8. He must have innocently shared this information with some of the children at school, because one day he came home from school very angry. He had been teased on the playground about not having any mommy. You know how kids can be. They can sometimes be very cruel. They were saying things like, Billy's so ugly that even his mom didn't want him. Anyway, he came home so hurt and just furious, wanting to know why his mummy would give him away, and demanding to know who she was and to see her right away. I felt terrible, of course. First for the anguish and hurts that I could see Billy was going through, and second for myself. I was filled with sadness because, of course, I felt that I was Billy's mommy. I stood there remembering the nights of changing diapers and nursing him through sickness, and all the things that mommies do, and my heart broke that Billy didn't see me as mom anymore, didn't think of me that way. But I understand. I had to understand, and I promised him that when he was older, if he still felt he wanted to, he would meet his mom. I would do whatever I could to find her and arrange it. This seemed okay with Billy, but he never did get over his anger. He just had this anger all through the rest of his childhood and into his teen years, which were very difficult for us. We all got through it, but it wasn't easy on any of us in the family, and certainly not on me. When Billy had grown older, we talked again about seeing his mother, and we made an agreement that when he turned 18, I would begin searching for her if he still wanted me to. Throughout the rest of his teen years, he reminded me of that promise. Finally, Billy's 18th birthday arrived. That day he was killed in a motorcycle accident. There was a collective gasp from the retreat participants. Abruptly, Helen's energy shifted into anger. Now I want you to tell me, she snapped, how any kind of loving God could have let that happen. Just when Billy was about to meet his mother, just when his father and I were about to reconcile the strain that his yearning had placed on our relationship. I want you to tell me, why would God do that? The room plummeted into stunned silence. I was stopped cold. I stared at Helen for a moment, then closed my eyes and went within. I heard my thoughts. Okay, God, this is it. I don't know what to say here. You've got to help me out. Suddenly, my eyes popped open, my mind overflowing. I spoke the words I heard in my head before I had a chance to judge them or edit them. Billy died on that day because that was the day on which he was promised he would meet his mother. And he did. On that day his mother was not on this earth. The room gasped again. Someone whispered an emphatic yes. Someone else openly cried. I went on. There is no such thing as an accident, and nothing happens by coincidence. You were given a biological son, even though you had not been able to conceive, and it looked as if you might never be able to do so, because there was a plan, a larger plan in place. You were given the special gift of your biological son in exchange for your willingness to take Billy in, give him a home, love him, and raise him as your own, and care for him until he was ready to meet his mother and she was ready to meet him. The day of Billy's death was the happiest day of his life. His gratefulness to you for bringing him to that moment is eternal. It surrounds your heart even now and creates with you an everlasting bond. There is perfection in life's design, in every human circumstance and experience, in every condition. Our opportunity is to notice this. That is also our release, our salvation, the end to your suffering and our pain. Helen's face changed immediately. Filled with anger just moments before, now it was aglow. Her whole body seemed drained of every tension. She looked relaxed for the first time in a very long while. Tears ran down her cheeks, even as she smiled with a radiance that filled the room. I've told this story because I want everyone to know what Helen and all the other participants in that retreat now know. There is no magic formula that has been given to us by the heaven. It is a formula with which all sadness, all anger, all negativity surrounding any human experience is dissolved. It is a formula that allows us to recreate ourselves anew. It is a formula easy to remember and stated in 3 words. See the perfection. But does it work? Does it really work? On New Year's Eve, Helen handed me a note that she'd written when she'd returned to her room after a walk under the clear, crisp Colorado sky the night before. Like Robert Frost and Liselle Mueller, she had also turned to poetry to speak the beauty of her knowing. I came here with a burdened heart, a heart afraid to cry. It's near 3 years since Billy left, and I couldn't say goodbye. I stood alone beside his grave, and couldn't even cry. We had a deal, I said to him. You left me high and dry. It's near 3 years since Billy left. God had not seen fit to try to soothe this heart, to heal this heart, to give me tears to cry. And then God spoke. He pointed out that even though he tried, my heart was closed and couldn't hear his gentlest, ageless sigh. And though it was just Neil whose voice brought the message from on high, my spirit heard God's words tonight, and now my eyes can cry. I took a walk this starry night. It's finally time to try to find the joy to free my son. It's time to say goodbye. And as I did, a shooting star danced across the sky.